All right. Thank you so much, Sharkspur. I think I got it now. You should all be able to hear us. Hello and welcome, everyone. Uh, you've heard nothing I've said, which is fine because I was very animated about it, and I'm sure it was worthwhile just to watch. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Dungeon Master with your host and technically, it's not that I'm technically illiterate, Tony. Give me the right word for it. When you're bumbling at something, you're incompetent, technically incompetent host, and my illustrious co-host, Tony. How are you, Tony?
I'd call you an aspiring technophile.
I'm an aspirant. Well, you can be a technophile without being competent at it, right? You can be into technology and enjoy it. Hell if I know. All right, so let's jump in. So today I want to talk about Origins for a bit, and I don't know how much Tony, I want to jump in because you've not been, but feel free to share any other convention related stories, information. So what is Origins? Origins is a gaming convention. It's centered primarily around tabletop role-playing games, although they certainly have card games and board games and some live-action role-playing and that sort of thing. So what I did this year, because I've never been to Origins and I've always wanted to go. I remember as a kid in Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine, I would see advertisements for both Gen Con and Origins. They've been around for a long, long time. I don't know for sure when Origins started, but I think in the 80s. Gen Con started quite a while before that, even before Gary and Dave created Dungeons and Dragons. Gary was doing Gen Con. I always talked about going to Origins, never had. 2002, I finally went to Gen Con, and I've gone to Gen Con quite regularly, on a quite regular basis since, but never had the chance to Origins. So, I mean, it's hard to justify two, sort of major vacations every summer for most folks. So, but this year, because I'm professionally DMing and because it's literally the whole thing that I do, and it pays my bills, my electric bill, my phone bill, and gas for our cars and food for the children, and the adults. And anyway, I can justify it, right? I can write it out. I'll say I decided I would sort of treat it as a marketing trip, and sure enough, I've already gotten a handful of folks that have signed up for ongoing, paid games that have become new clients because of Origins. So what I did for Origins, I was kind of wanting to do it as a proof of concept as far as the recruiting thing. And so I went down with the idea of going for free, because you can do that if you run a certain number of hours, you can get a free badge. And this is true for other conventions too, usually, like Gen Con. You can get a free badge. And if you run enough, you can get your hotel room, your share of a hotel room paid for. So I ran eight 4-hour sessions over the course of the 5 days. So it was quite a marathon, more D&D that I would normally run at home in a 5-day period. Although, because I was running adventures that I was running the same adventure multiple times and adventures that I'd previously run, I didn't have the extra prep time involved that I would for my normal clients. And, and I had to trade, of course, this week's paid games to be able to go down there. So it was a bit of a risk, but it seems to have paid off already. I've gotten some new clients, but so here are my takeaways on Origins. If you've ever been to Gen Con, it's really the best way for me to compare, because I know a lot of folks, more folks have been there. So it's the attendance is maybe a third to a quarter of what Gen Con is. In terms of number of people. The dealers hall, the vendors hall, while it's quite impressive and certainly bigger than most sort of local conventions here in Michigan, like even Motor City Comic Con, it's I would say similar. The vendor area was probably similar to what it is at Motor City Comic Con. Definitely bigger than UConn down in the Ann Arbor region. But there's probably a couple hundred vendors altogether, maybe not quite that many. And so you could buy just about anything you wanted gaming related there. The only purchase I made this year, and I don't have them. I wanted to show them to you, but I left them out in my other bag, is a set of commemorative dice. And so I always buy the commemorative dice because I have sucker written across my head, and all the companies know if it's official for representing the convention or whatever for 1 year, I'm probably going to buy it, especially if there's a year number on it, because I'm a collector, not one that is planning on making any money off those things because they won't necessarily appreciate in value, but I'm a collector. So I ran a lot of games. One thing I was amazed at, I ran a bunch of my OS1, the Shard Storm adventure. And for those of you who are clients, a lot of my clients start out playing that one. It's a one shot that I do on startplaying.games. And it's part of the point of it is to sort of introduce Fantasy Grounds as the virtual tabletop. But it's also sort of geared toward newer players. It's designed to be a second level adventure, that sort of thing. So what was really cool about it is I ran it 4 times. 2 of the times that I ran it, I had the players came up with a sort of an out of the box idea that in the 30 plus other times I've run it, no other group has. So that was really cool because, again, I've run this thing probably 3 dozen times. And for example, one of without spoiling it, because some of you might play it eventually, it's sort of a 2-phase adventure. There's sort of this initial start. The adventure starts with sort of this fight scene. And then there's a period of preparation, getting ready for sort of the second big event. And during this initial fight scene, the party this time around basically managed to befriend one of the bad guys, which was something no group had ever attempted. And so they basically got a lot more information about what to expect during the second phase. And I was pretty impressed with that. And then another group, during that preparation middle phase of the adventure that I mentioned, there are 6 different tasks that are usually the party splits to do these various things. And for the first time in 30 some odd games, this group came up with a 7th useful potential task that I hadn't thought of and that no other group had thought of. So it was really kind of cool. It's also really cool to be running in person with physical miniatures and whatnot. I did that for the first time since the pandemic started. I did it for the first time back in September at Gen Con. And it was for some friends. I only ran just the one game there, and it was a little rough because making that transition from virtual to physical, or back to physical, was just, I don't know, surreal almost. But this time it was smooth as my good friend Aaron says, slicker than snot on a glass doorknob. Tony, that's really gross. Actually, it's slicker than snot on a glass doorknob.
I think it depends on the kind of snot, how slippery it is.
Oh, that's even worse. Thanks. I hate it. So that was Origins. Now, advice: if you want to go to a convention like that, if you're going to run enough games to stay for free, just be aware that you don't have a whole lot of free time. I spent maybe a total of 2 hours in the vendor hall. I did manage to get to play in a game off schedule. I played in a Vampire the Masquerade LARP. For those of you who don't know, LARP just stands for live action role playing. There are different types. There are sort of fantasy LARPs that usually have buffers. By that I mean foam, swords, and shields. There's a huge amped guard, AMT guard. Amped guard, I think it's how it's pronounced. Anyway, they're a fantasy LARP that sort of does the buffers. Huge amped guard presence at Origins. So if you're into that Origins is a great place for that. Not so much with Vampire. Vampire's been out of vogue for quite some time. Doesn't help that the intellectual property, Vampire's IP, has been sold and resold half a dozen times in as many years. But I got to do the Vampire LARP. That was awesome. It was one thing that was kind of cool is it was set in meant to be set in 1996. So it was quite a kind of fun throwback to the idea of not having internet access, for example, or text messaging, within the context of the game. So that was cool. But if you're going to do this, be aware that if you're going to run that many games, it is going to take up most of your time. You're not going to see the other cool stuff that you want to see as much. And if it's not your first time at a convention, I recommend against it. I mean, if it's the only way you can afford to go, then do it because it's better than not. But be ready to be exhausted. Now, the other bit of advice is if the guys from Alchemy RPG, now, for those of you who don't know, just Google Alchemy RPG or alchemyrpg.com. They've got a cool product. It's sort of it's sort of a virtual tabletop, but it's also it integrates lore and whatnot. I would say it's sort of both a campaign management software as well as virtual tabletop. It's very light. It's meant to be theater of the mind. So that sort of thing. So it's not really like a full functioning VTT, but it's kind of a cool product, especially if you're playing theater of the mind games. Anyway, if you do go to a convention and if the guys from Alchemy RPG ask you to sit at the table outside the hotel after your long day and have a beer, just know that it's possible that you'll be there till 3 a.m, have way too many beers, and have to DM a game at 8 a.m., which is not ideal, especially if you are like me, almost 50 years old. So fair warning, and shout out to the guys at Alchemy, both for the free beer and for the great conversation. So that's my origins. Again, I encourage everybody to go. Biggest takeaway compared to Gen Con is that there's definitely more gaming per person going on. There are more games available to be played per capita than there are at Gen Con. So if you want a gaming convention, Gen Con's great for the spectacle and sort of the events, the entertainment and all that. Origins, you just want to go game for five days because it's a 5-day con. The vendor hall's only open for 4, but the con goes 5. You want to do that, go to Origins. So, all right, that's
about Alchemy.
Yeah,
I just had a question. Do they have a map as part of their product, or is it just?
So I've just started to look into it a little bit more after having hung out with those guys. I was only sort of peripherally aware of it prior to Origins, but I think they have some ability to. They don't have like a map, tokens, that sort of thing, but they do have ability to share media of various sorts, right? So, but it is the product is gorgeous, and if you're going to play theater of the mind, primarily theater of the mind, I can't recommend it enough. It's just a beautiful looking product, and they've got a great community of content developers, and there's built-in streaming, and so I encourage folks to check it out. I might experiment with it. I don't know. I might start up maybe a short campaign or something on Alchemy just to mess around with it. So yeah. All right. So that's my origins story. Now, Tony, you've been to conventions of various sorts before. It seems like we've had that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I've play tested games, like short games, certainly never multi-hour sit down.
Yeah.
I mean, I have not been to a convention since learning how to play D&D.
Sure. Yeah. No,
So
it's
certainly,
different, right?
yeah.
It's different than like a local comic convention. Like, we have, again, Motor City Comic Con down in Detroit. While they might have games, it's certainly not a major thing at all. It's everything else. It's the spectacle and the celebrity and that sort of thing. Although they do like Magic tournaments and other collectible card game tournaments at Motor City. So, yeah. All right. So Tony asked me yesterday, what are we talking about tomorrow? And of course, because I have my editorial calendar planned out weeks and weeks in advance, and coincidentally, it's everything is always the same, which is decide the day before, is what it says on the editorial calendar. So he suggested that we workshop an adventure. And so tell me, Tony, what the premise is here. Why are we doing this? Where did this come from? And what's the sort of the adventure seed that you were given?
All right. First off, if any of my players are watching, stop.
Mute and walk away. Keep the stream running because we like the numbers.
You can watch, you can tune in and watch later. I'm sure you like the views also, the long tail of YouTube views.
Yeah.
Since you're making all those advertising dollars.
Yeah, the big money, yeah.
So that said, I've wanted to run a one shot, and I have run plenty of one shots, but I wanted to ask my players, instead of just here's what it is, I wanted to get some feedback from my players. What are you looking for? What do you want? And the consensus was they wanted a level 10 desert oasis prison break. And so as much as I searched on DM's Guild and Drive Through RPG, I could not find a pre-written level 10 desert oasis prison break. I found some level 10 one shots. I found some desert settings, and I did find some prison break one shots. But as I went into this, I realized what I'm really doing is homebrewing an adventure, which I've never done before. And I thought that viewers of DM Bobio's illustrious stream might be interested in similar content, how to homebrew an adventure, whether that be setting or combat, environment, puzzles, and even length, because typically you want to not leave your one shots open-ended. Although I am a fan of the mini adventure, the 4-shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a mini campaign or a mini arc. Yeah.
So, Bob, what were your reactions to that? The first gut reactions?
So if I'm the DM, and first of all, I think it's interesting that they chose level 10, because the sweet spot in 5th edition, and this is subjective, but for me, the sweet spot in 5th edition seems to be just through about the early teens, through about 13, 14, which is considered tier 3. I guess they divide into 4 tiers, if I remember right.
11 to 15, I think is 11 to 15 is tier 3.
Yeah, and so tier 2 and 3 seem to be the sweet spot. So that's an interesting choice of level.
And it was the average, right? Someone said 8 to 10, someone said 10 to 12.
Sure. I love the idea. See, I'm a big fan of Dark Sun. If you're familiar with that setting, that's a 2nd edition setting that they brought back in 4E for a while, and I don't expect we'll see any new Dark Sun material for several more years, if at all. But Dark Sun is a desert world, basically, and the world has been sort of made into this desert world by the use of arcane magic. and arcane magic basically has sucked the life out of the world over time. And the world is pretty oppressive in general, right? It's run by it's a series of city states run by sorcerer kings. And it's very gritty. Matter of fact, in second edition, if you were to play Dark Sun, characters always started at third level. To my knowledge, it's the only campaign setting where characters started at a higher level than first, like by default. So anytime you say desert, I think either Dark Sun or I think the Desert of Desolation series by Tracy and Laura Hickman from AD&D. And immediately I'm thinking Dark Sun because gladiatorial combat is a thing. Enslaved persons are a thing. I immediately think, well, I'm going to find a second edition Dark Sun adventure that will give me a prison break, right? Yeah, and exactly those darn halflings turn the world into desert. The Edwin, I don't know if the halflings did it, but the halflings are cannibals in Dark Sun, by the way. So yeah, that's probably the approach I'm going to take, but that's because I've been doing this so long that I've got this sort of repertoire of sources to draw from. So I'm probably going to go there for inspiration if it's me. Now, if I don't come up with anything, we'll assume that I've done that and I didn't come up with anything. So, desert prison break. Yeah.
I wanted to add that this was coincidental because I support several D&D creators on Patreon, and one of them had recently released a homebrew monster, and the monster is called Salanek Spirit of the Dunes, and it's a giant sand snake. It's an elemental, and sort of I read it as very similar to the Elder Tempest, if you want to look that up on D&D Beyond. So it has you know, a 120-foot burrow speed. It has some abilities like it sucks people into its wake, and then they get sucked into the sand and start suffocating and have to make checks to get out. It has like a sand spit. It has a perpetual storm around it that, you know, miles long, that imposes disadvantage on ranged weapon attacks, I think. So I saw this and I'm like, this is a great final boss. I mean, CR 21, but whatever. These are advanced players. They can manage, I think.
Yeah, at 10th level, and you know, challenge rating breaks down, in my experience, above the sweet spot. Once you get above 13th, 14th level, the CR on monsters is, you know, the accuracy of it is, you know, meh.
I also I was pretty generous with the character build. I said any official content, no restrictions, and I gave them each 15,000 gold to spend on whatever they wanted, including items from the Sane Magical Items list that you can find online that Bob uses in his games.
Yeah, no, the same magic items prices list is amazing. It needs some updates, and I need to spend some time looking, because you know there have been a number of new books out and whatnot, some things that should probably be tweaked. But yeah, Edwin mentions Sandstorm. It was a third edition book called Sandstorm, which is very much desert settings. And now he mentions too the big sand snake might be inspired by the recent Dune movie. Now you had watched that for some inspiration, is that right, Tony?
Just last week, I stupidly started it at like 2 a.m. and I had something to do in the morning, but you know, everybody was asleep. I was very frustrated that it was part one. I expected a complete movie, but it was pretty good. But yeah, they have these giant sand snakes, and it would be similar to that. Although I would say the sand snakes in Dune are monstrosities, sort of purple worms. versus this one is an elemental, a sort of force of nature. I mean, I guess the sand snakes and dune are also forces of nature, but this one's more, I don't know, like dust. It's gonna blast you instead of
Sure.
swallow you.
Yeah. Sharkspur is mentioning the sly flourish, lazy dungeon master, sly flourish method of encounter design, which I'd not encountered before. He says above, or maybe I haven't just forgotten it. I'm sure that's the latter, but above level 4, you add the cumulative levels of the party members, divide in half, and that's how many CR you have to work with for your monsters for it to verge on deadly. So CR 21 for 4 10th level characters is about right. Might be a little light for 5 or 6. So that's interesting. I may have to compare some of that. I'm skeptical, especially in above above about levels and CR 13. I really think the system math just breaks down completely. So I might mess with that some and see.
Yeah, and this it's tempting to, I actually think, what if I plug like an Elder Tempest into or a CR 21 monster? What's a CR 21 monster? Quiz off the top of your head.
There are a couple of named demons whose names are escaping me. One's female and
Oh, a Lich is a CR 21 monster.
is it? Okay.
There we go. And so, uh, 5 level 10 characters. This is a deadly encounter with just this one. Pretty deadly, but not above their daily budget.
Right. Right.
So as long as I make this the big one, they also, magic items really tip the scale. And it's, and like, say there's a paladin in the party that it does have hit points, like it could be knocked down in a couple rounds. So while it's tempting to sort of add monsters, like what if I threw a Dow in there, or a couple dust methods to be annoying, I would rather make this encounter about the environment and see what I could add in terms of a lair action that's a wind that knocks everybody prone.
They've handed you a gift there by asking for desert, because desert opens up all sorts of possibilities, right? You've got wind, you've got heat, you have sand. So you have really the only elemental sort of force to work with as an environmental thing that you don't have is water.
I also have lightning, because it's sort of static.
Sure.
In fact, this monster does have a lightning strike attack. So that's what I was thinking. It's also a siege monster, so I could put a couple structures where the players think they're safe, and the thing just knocks it down.
See, that's just rude. Why would you do
that? And I'm also tempted to sort of run the encounter by myself with me controlling all the player characters to just sort of see what I would do. And see, yeah, but I have a lot of trust in my players that they'll come up with creative solutions. I know that I've been in a player in an encounter where the dragon kept burrowing, and it was super annoying because you can't attack it. And
right?
The DM was kind of ruling somewhat reasonably that we don't know where it is.
Right. All right.
It went underground. I was like, yeah, but where is the ground rumbling? And I would probably give my players that, like the dune snakes, they disturb the sand above them.
Right.
And I probably wouldn't have it go deeper than, I don't know, 20 feet. However big it is, 10 feet under.
All right. So I kind of want to share the stats. So for that monster. So all right. So which I'll work on here in a second. So all right. So we have an end boss, and this is meant to be a one shot, right? Not a mini campaign, not a 4-shot. It's meant to be a single session. Is that right?
I have purposefully left it open to being, a 2 to 4 shot.
Okay.
If we finish in one, I don't think anyone will be devastated.
Right.
But
okay.
Usually my one shots go long just because I'm going off of a pre-written thing, and I have no idea how long things are going to take.
Sure. I asked because I think an encounter like what we're describing, when the final boss encounter, in my experience at level 10, how many players do you have?
It'll be 4 or 5.
I'm going to peg that the time for that encounter. And are you using? I'm assuming you use Foundry, so you'll have the virtual tabletop with automation. I'm assuming about an hour and a half of playtime for that final encounter, between an hour and an hour and a half. Could go longer, but I'm guessing that's that. So if you were trying to fit inside of a single 4-hour session, that would definitely inform how much more content to the adventure that we need. So let me ask you this. So you've got the final boss encounter in mind. Have you thought about the why of it, or that boss? Why are they fighting him?
So the way I interpreted Prison Break Desert Oasis is, I figured it could be that they've been exiled somewhere. The form of your imprisonment is not jail, it's exile. And they've ended up in the quasi-elemental plane of sand, or sometimes called the elemental plane of dust. It's the negative plane of Earth. So it's where it's like the plane of Earth, but everything's broken down. So there's just dust everywhere. It's very hostile, but there are different takes on the lore, but there are areas of water. So I can say that this area, sort of like the Mandalorian planet where they were fighting the giant sand snakes too. There was an isolated community, so there could be a sort of isolated community, and the jailbreak is getting off the planet, or getting off the plane. Luckily 10th is not high enough level for plane shift.
Right.
And so perhaps this, I would love to characterize this snake as a storm, and it only becomes apparent later that it's actually a creature, that the storm is a creature. And then perhaps on the other side of this storm is an astral ship, or like some other resident of the village had crash landed, and they gather this information that there is a broken down astral ship that they could repair and escape if only they could get there. So that's kind of where I'm at.
All right. And I'm going to do a little transition here so we can look at that monster a little bit here. So I think I've got it. And then we go. Let's add that and 3. All right, so there we have the. I'm sharing the image, the cool big sort of sand snake picture that you gave me, and then, which I think that artwork is great. That is just terrifying. And then here's the stat block. I don't know how well everybody will be able to see it on their stream. Hopefully well enough. Actually, let's see if I go full screen here.
For anyone who wants to support the creator on Patreon, this is from Abyssal Brews, but I got this for being a supporter of Tom Kartos, who makes maps, and they had a collaboration. I just want to give credit.
No, actually,
credit is due, you know?
Awesome. Actually, awesome. Yes. Highly recommend, by the way. We talk about that another time, but there are a number of, in terms of DMing with integrity, I could get on a soapbox about supporting creators, but let's just say, yes, please support your creators. So, all right. So this guy is just crazy. He's got legendary actions, which is always nice. I don't see any legendary. Oh, he does. Legendary resistance. All right. He's got sort of standard legendary resistance. His weakness, what is it? Let's see. It's going to be intelligence saves. Obviously, he's at a -4 in his intelligence mod.
Yeah, because he's a storm, basically.
Yeah. Interesting. But of course, he's immune to certain intelligence-based effects like petrified and paralyzed, and and stunned. Those are some of the cool things that you can do with intelligence saves. Because what I'm looking for right now is how are your players going to beat this much faster than you anticipated? You see any other glaring weaknesses?
One potential weakness is it can't fly. And it looks like, its effective reach is only 90 feet, which someone with a broom of flying can get up to 100 feet in a round. But being up there, so you could potentially just stay hovering up there and firing arrows Tarask style,
Nope, that's true. Let's see. What about his lightning strike? Is that the one? 6120. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at the blasting winds, which is devastating.
Right. That's his big one, 90-10.
And several of the effects, if he knocks someone prone while flying, they're dead.
And you can't really put a ceiling. I mean, there's not an obvious way that's not contrived anyway to put a ceiling in that encounter.
Yeah, the contrived ceiling could be that, the storm is very violent up there. And so you might start taking bludgeoning damage if you go really high.
No, there you go. Yeah, no, I think that's your golden ticket. Yeah, I don't see other than those two things. I don't really, the low intelligence save and the flying thing. I don't really see any major glaring weaknesses. All right, so I think this will be a good final encounter. But so are we? I guess you tell me or remind me from our conversation. Are we looking at? Do we want to build out the adventure? Or do we want to zone in further on the encounter as far as environmental stuff and whatnot?
Well,
what's your preference?
Let's sort of work our way backwards, because that might inform the final encounter. So for example, if we determine that I don't know, that the village has a wall that might impact the effects of the storm, because maybe they've guarded themselves against the storm. Is it or does the storm impact the village there? My wife is from Kuwait, and so I frequently see pictures from her family of actual sandstorms where, it's like fog but brown and the sky is red, and it's maybe I'll find one to share.
Right on. Well, and Sharksford definitely likes the idea. Make flyers suffer from the storm effects. That was smart.
Yes, that was a good point. Is that they could fly over
To get to the astral ship. Yep.
But my solution for that is the snake goes over to the astral ship. They're gonna need to get to the ground.
Right. To the ship itself at some point. Yeah.
With 120-foot speed and legendary actions per round,
Yeah.
no one's gonna outspeed that thing.
He can definitely put himself between them and the ship wherever they go. No, that's a good point. All right, so let's work backwards. Now, if it's me, so when I design an adventure, I start usually with general theme setting like you've got, and then I don't necessarily worry about sequence for me because I prefer to make adventures that the sequence isn't as important, other than sort of the final boss, right? So, so I start to think about beats and what I want to accomplish with each of them. And in a one shot, generally, I try to have a total of 4 beats. For me, this is for me because I'm looking at 4 hours, so roughly an average of 1 an hour. So I have sort of the final encounter thing, and then I want a role play beat. I want an exploration beat, and then the 4th one usually is a second for me anyway, because it's you play to your strengths. It's a second combat. Now, your one shot, is it scheduled to be 4 hours? And obviously, you can go longer, like you mentioned, or multiple sessions. But how long is it scheduled for? Just sort of a whatever?
Yeah, at least 3. We have in the calendar, but it's not unprecedented to go to 4.
Okay. All right, but it's not like the boys and I did in the 90s where until you start at 7 o'clock at night and you go till 4 in the morning. You're not talking about like a 9-hour session or anything like that.
I would love that, but there's a lot of parents in the group.
Yeah, I haven't done that since. Although actually, when my kids were young, we had a group and we hosted at our house, and Angie and I would both play, and we'd play till 3 in the morning, and we'd take turns getting up with the kids the next day. We didn't play every week, so it was like we played twice a month. So basically once a month, one of us had to stay up late and get up early, so it wasn't so bad.
Yeah. So the and I'll have hopefully kids soon. My wife is expecting twins.
Yes, which we are all excited about.
I was a little late because we were in Cambridge looking at baby strollers, which is so exciting.
I'm so excited for you guys. I really am.
My time to spend on D&D, windows shrinking.
Yep, it happens. Okay, so have you thought at all about any other elements or any other specifics that you want to include in this, or just so far we just have the sort of the big bad, and we know it's a prison break desert oasis?
So just a couple ideas. I also asked my players, why are you exiled there? Like, why are you imprisoned? Did you know each other before? Like, was your whole party exiled, or were you, did you just kind of meet each other here? And them being a little silly, came up with a silly little story about how they were like all trading in illicit spice. But one of them was a sort of late career wizard who actually was trying to buy spell components and just sort of obliviously, not realizing that these were like illicit, illegal components. And then one of them is an eloquence bard who acts as their lawyer. So I'm just imagining most of them in a jail cell, but the bard shows up with a guard or something, who says like, you have 10 minutes, whatever. And the bard just pulls all their shit out of a portable hole or something and says, let's go.
All right, good. So you've got a sort of an intro in mind then, which that's good because that's the obvious question. You gave them
And
15,000 gold. How did they get it in prison?
yeah, and then the my brother, who I was sort of pitching this to, who doesn't really play D&D, but it reminded him of the game Borderlands. And apparently there's a town where it's just one guy, but acting as a bunch of villagers. So like he'll say like, oh, you need to go see so and so, and they get there and it's just like a scarecrow with a speaker, and he's like doing a different voice. And so he's like giving them quests, but he's just sort of crazy because he's everyone in the town. If we opt not to go the actual prison route, it could be socially navigating a weird situation because maybe people went crazy.
Sure.
Spending, especially maybe long-lived races. You can imagine, I imagine long-lived races would suffer more from isolation.
You would think. You would think. All right. So, well, I guess that's the first question then. Is the prison, is it literal physical bars and cells? Or is it the remoteness of the location and the harshness of the storm surrounding it?
Or maybe it's a sort of underground labyrinth, and like that's the prison, is just you'll never escape. I don't know. All these are options. This is where I got stuck.
Yep. Well, I think what we have to do, and certainly those of you who are listening, please chime in. We have to pick something and run with it, right? I like the idea of a prison without walls, right? And it's the same concept as the prison planet. Or all right, here we go. Australia, right? So it's just remote, and so although they didn't just ship prisoners to Australia and drop them off, they had basically little colonies with with some soldiers and some guards, but nobody escaped and ran off, or if they did, they typically wound up getting killed by spiders and scorpions and other nasty things out in the outback. So I like that analogy, maybe. What do you think? Sort of the prison without walls.
Yeah, I sort of like the prison without walls because it plays to the main antagonist being the storm. Otherwise, it kind of comes out of left field. They think they escaped the prison, and
Yeah.
that was the main thing, as opposed to I like the idea of hints at the beginning that like the main problem is look at the sky.
Right. All right. So does this why and sharks were sort of why doesn't the storm destroy the town? So maybe the settlement, it could be underground. That could be why, I guess, like you mentioned.
It could also be, another idea I had is maybe there's some sort of noble genie. Like nobody could survive the plane of sand without some sort of
Fair.
mysterious magic. So maybe this is a town like under the protection of or this is his home, and he sort of, doesn't, these are ants in his home, like he doesn't care. And so that's why the storm doesn't touch this place. And they could, of course, ask this being for help, but I wouldn't care about you if I were a noble genie. I just came here to be alone.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah, I like, and maybe that's a question that they have to investigate even to find out.
Yeah,
right. But what they know is that their oasis is safe. That's what they know. They may not even know why. And is there an agreement between the jailers back in the prime material plane, and the genie, maybe that's why the genie allows it.
Oh yeah, Earth Genie love gems, so maybe he gets paid
Yep.
to just sort of allow
Yeah.
these
The ants.
ants to
Yeah.
to
Long as
occupy the home.
long as they stay out of his picnic basket. So maybe
Yeah, he has an ant farm, the equivalent, right? Like a little thing on the side that
all right. So let's run with that for a minute. So
I'm just
gonna
imagining this like fat cat, governor type
yeah.
that is living a life of luxury in a hostile place
Right.
by oppressing others.
And so he's got, and maybe the jailers aren't from the prime either. Maybe the jailers are, they work for the genie. Maybe they're primarily elementals. Although that gets a little tricky then because at some point we're going to introduce a second encounter, and we want it to be distinct in some ways from the final encounter. We don't want to have the same kinds of resistances and whatnot. So maybe we need somebody that's not an elemental there for them to fight as well, or not elemental related.
There could be Genasi, like Earth Genasi. There also could be.
That's true. Genasi take it away from sort of just being strictly elemental, don't they?
There could also be like the Dune equivalent of the Fremen, where it's just a sort of native people who've adapted to this place. It could also be like other slaves are the guards.
Oh, sure.
And, maybe that's a promotion tree for slaves.
Right on. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's good. All right. So, and what do the guards really do? Like the jailers. So what is life like inside the oasis, inside the prison? Obviously there's some sort of a hierarchy or pecking order, in that there are guards, but the guards don't really have to keep people from leaving. I'm assuming it's forced labor. I'm assuming that the prisoners are enslaved persons, probably.
Yeah, probably. Because maybe it's similar to like Alcatraz. There are guards, but also ocean.
Right. Well, and the guards honestly don't really care as much if you go out in the storm here, even, because like you're just going to die. I mean, that's less.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fewer laborers that we have, but okay, you're relatively expendable. Edwin suggests maybe the advancement is prisoner, and then you're a guard, and then the most brutal guards are selected for a secret elite army. So maybe it's also, in addition to being a prison, used by the genie or some other power. Maybe the genie is using it to create these elite villains, and maybe he's selling them to the highest bidder, or maybe it's for some sort of ideological group, a cult or something. Maybe maybe there's a cult that worships the jinn, and so if this were to develop into a longer term campaign, you've got all sorts of potential hooks as well. It can become a campaign where basically you're trying to undo, in the long term, this cult and fighting against this secret elite army. Edwin, I like that idea. I like that idea.
It would also give an alternate branch, like an alternate option for players to explore, like the social solve.
Right.
I could still sneak in my snake by saying like, all right, now you're not trying to escape, you're trying to do a fetch quest for the genie, that there's like a trove of ore on the other side of this storm that he really doesn't want to be bothered with going to get himself, and like maybe you can prove yourselves by going to get it, and then he'll wish you off the plane or whatever.
I see. I really like that, because I mean, one shots by their nature very often are just kind of a railroad, and it's what it is, right? The games that I ran at Origins this last week by design are 4-hour adventures that have these specific things taking place. And while there's a little bit of wiggle room, and there's certainly room for creativity and individuality, the overall plot train is going where it's going. Sandboxing a 4-hour game it's not that it's not impossible, it's just less entertaining, right? Because
Sandboxing.
Yeah. Oh, get it? Fair enough. Sandboxing. I didn't mean to pun, but I did, and it was lovely. Yeah, and Sharkspur adds another level in there: prisoner, and then gladiator, and then guard. So maybe there's fights inside, and maybe there's our other encounter, and maybe we even start with it's fight day, and your group is fighting, another group of prisoners. What do you think of that?
That would be cool.
Because that lets, for encounter design, that leaves it wide open, because you can pull anything. Anybody could be a prisoner.
Yeah, or even, I mean, another trope is monsters, like the gladiators face the lions.
Oh yeah, sure. Absolutely. Oh, that's true too. Yeah, absolutely. So you've got, I always like the idea of starting a session out with a fight scene, because I think it sets the pacing, a quick fight, right? And in our, that can be, even apart from the beats that I mentioned, the 4 beats, that can be just sort of the intro. It doesn't even necessarily count if it's like a 10-minute fight. So we can go a couple directions. You can go a couple directions with that. You can do that opening encounter as a sort of, and during the encounter, you manage to do things like point out the storm right above, and point out the guards, and maybe the genie is watching from a box up in the stands or something. Yeah. So it allows you to bring in a number of your sort of set, your set design, or your set pieces, and sort of introduce them in the middle of the action. I don't know. When you run a one shot, have you started with a fight? Do you have any thoughts or preferences from the ones that you've run?
I usually start with a hook, and I'm not saying this is the best way to do it,
Yeah.
but a lot of the ones I've written kind of start with a hook and a social encounter. Like, please help my whatever in the cave.
Right. Well, and you meet in a tavern is by its nature. I mean, that's sort of the default, beginning of any adventure, whether it's campaign or a one shot. And I over the years, I've just sort of gravitated away from that, because starting with a combat just seems, and it's nice because when I start with a combat, not only can you like point out these are set pieces, you can also do sort of brief flashbacks during the combat. So if you're using the optional flanking rules, for example, the elf and the dwarf wind up flanking, you can and know your audience, right? I mean, read the room. If your players are comfortable with sort of being put on the spot from sort of an RP perspective, you can say, all right, so the elf and dwarf have flanked this character. You can say, that actually brings to mind, elf, another time that you and dwarf found yourselves in a fight. Tell me a little bit about that fight. And it gives the player a chance to sort of riff a little bit. And it's still, that's the stuff that we often do. We're doing it now with action as opposed to, more narrative, right? Because at some point we would say, okay, how do your characters know each other? And well, we used to adventure together. Well, now we know that the elf and the dwarf adventured together, but we're doing it in such a way that it's a memory moment rather than a description. And
they're super comfortable RPing. I mean, they're all theater people, and One of them asked me if he could play a blood hunter goblin. And I was like, yeah, I guess. Why? And he's like, because I really want to play a character named Hemogoblin.
Unlike, unfollow, unfriend, block. No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Hemogoblin. Yeah, Edwin is a quick combat with some creatures that are no true challenge, gives the players a chance to test out the characters, what they can do. And it also establishes a rapport between the characters that isn't necessarily even on a conscious level, right? Because here they are, they're cemented as allies more than just narratively, because they're fighting against something else.
I could see that the creatures that are no true challenge to level 10 would be like boulettes, which also burrow. And so could be sort of practice for a giant burrowing creature. Like, how are you going to deal with this?
Oh, there you go. It's a little foreshadowing even. All right. Yeah, I like that. So let's see. Let me do this in D&D Beyond as well. We have 4 characters, 5 characters.
4 or 5. The 5th is iffy on attendance, but so 4 or 5.
All right, I'm going to do it since you say your players are pretty competent in terms of optimization and whatnot. I'm going to call it 5 10s. And all right, so if we're going to build let's get a filter in here on challenge rating. Gosh, it's still so many creatures. Boy, Bulette. Well, let's look at Bulette since you've got them. Well, I don't even need to. All right, I'll get Bulettes and undead Bulettes. So if a single Bulette, 1, 2, 3, 4 Bulettes is deadly according to D&D Beyond, and it is about a third, between a quarter and a third of the daily budget, and just barely deadly. So,
and a similar idea I had is maybe have you seen the Marvel movies?
oh yeah,
Right? You've seen them all.
Yep.
So I'm imagining like a Thor Ragnarok kind of thing where the game master has his champion. So like the genie will have his champion and like a Dow rides in on a chariot pulled by 2 bullets. Or 1 if we want to make it a little easier. And then that's the thing. They just have to defeat the champion. And that's doable. And it also leaves open also the game master, once Thor started to, spoilers for Ragnarok, once Thor started to win, he like zapped him so he wouldn't.
Right.
They could end up back in the jail cell.
Oh, I like that a lot. Or yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and now the 2 Bulettes and the Dow on D&D Beyond, that's at about half the daily budget and listed as deadly. I think that's probably about right. Although it won't be sort of that easy, right? Quick challenge. I guess that's the question, whether you want the opening combat to be just more of a, here's how we're opening. Is it an opening scene or is it a true combat? I think if it's just an opening scene, you give them 3 or 4 Bulettes and call it good.
Yeah.
Because when you put the Dow in there, it's definitely going to increase the time and difficulty significantly.
Although 1 boulette and 1 Dow instead of 3 boulettes is roughly the same difficulty.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
And then they could, I could actually introduce environment that would help them. And this, I'm sort of thinking of Hunger Games, how there's like, it's not just an open arena.
Mhm.
There's like a central area that has a lot of helpful items, but is also dangerously exposed. And then there's a lot of like nooks and crannies and whatever. So maybe there could be like a stone area in the middle of the arena where the bullets cannot burrow under. And then, but they're exposed to the Dow, who can fly. And then, maybe there might also be cover, like areas of cover where they could hide between attacks or something.
No, I think that's brilliant. And I do think you go with just one Bulette though, because again, because you want to treat this as not a full combat. And I think adding the stuff in the middle absolutely makes it easier. What kinds of stuff are you thinking that you put in the middle though?
Hmm.
It have to be something. It can't just be a healing potions. It have to be something pretty
Yeah, and they're
significant,
coming
I would
in.
think.
They're coming in loaded up on potions because I gave them that 15th. So I'm looking and they have like potions of speed and heroism. They're gonna be hasted every single combat for free, concentration free. So that's why I'm like,
Gotcha. Yeah.
you're
Okay.
you're
All
you're
right.
doubling your actions anyway.
Right on. Right on.
Uh, so in terms of like what can we add? Uh, there could be like, I don't know, like levers that drain one area of the arena so that the bullet becomes like sort of trapped. Like nothing to burrow up through.
All right. No, I like that. I'm looking for, there we go.
There could be like maybe some sort of turnstile that like both players have to dedicate their actions to, but if they can manage to turn it, then it'll send like a shock wave through the arena that damages whatever's underground.
All right.
Do Dow have any weaknesses?
That's what
Not
I'm looking
really.
for. And I'm in a weird place here on D&D Beyond for some reason. Here we go. Now they're immune to petrified. They have a oh God, their saving throws are all, other than con and strength, are all relatively weak.
Yeah, I don't think they hover. They should, but it doesn't say that they hover.
No, it doesn't.
So the environmental effect could knock them prone, which would hurt.
Yep.
It
Yep.
also doesn't say they're resistant to bludgeoning, which is also silly, I think.
Advantage on strength and dex saves against that would knock it prone. It's sure-footed.
Oh. So yeah, it explicitly can be knocked prone.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. So
I mean,
yeah.
if I
So a
were
lot.
making an earth genie, I would not let it be allowed to be prone.
Fair. Yeah. So I don't know what would we have in the center there. We can come back to that. We can come back to that.
Yeah.
All right. So we have we have our beginning and our end, more or less. We start with a sort of a gladiatorial combat. Now, all right, though, the question is, they have all their stuff in this gladiatorial combat. So I guess we do need some narrative before that. If indeed they have all their stuff. We at the very least need to narratively tell them about the bard and the 10 minutes thing.
The bard lawyer could show up and say, like, I've found you an out. Like, good news. Bad news is you'll have to survive a gladiatorial combat.
Right. But the other good news is you'll have your stuff for it.
Yeah.
And so, and the Jinn doesn't really, yeah, he's got his champion. Yeah, he sees that they've got their stuff. But again, they're ants. So maybe he's not even that concerned as long as the party isn't coming after him.
Yeah, he threw a termite into the ant farm to see what happens.
And maybe he even knows. Maybe he knows the lawyer's got the shit. Maybe he's just, he's bored and he wants to see. Yeah, I think absolutely that's what's going on.
Yeah, right. An eloquence bard with a minimum 20 on charisma more If they have a minimum 10 on the roll and 5 from charisma and 10 from proficiency because of expertise, they have minimum 25 on the checks,
Right.
which is very convincing.
It's quite compelling. It's quite compelling. And we need to do a session on skill checks because, there are some, especially with charisma based checks, there are some things that no matter how convincing you are, you're not going to convince, somebody to do.
Yeah, you're
So
not going to convince the king to act.
But absolutely it could, that would, you could absolutely say, yes, this is the setup and here's how it happened. But I think you do it narratively and then you jump with just enough time to have players introduce their characters, have them do the physical description. What I always like to do is give me the physical description and what I would know about your character after having shared a meal. So that gives players just a little bit, it gives them the physical and it gives them a little bit of personality. So I think you do that and then you say, okay, here's this, you've got your stuff. Here's you're led to the arena. You got to beat this guy. Once that happens, things will be, maybe there's something else causing chaos that'll allow you to escape the guards, or maybe that's the second scene, right? Maybe the second scene is a chase scene. You're out of the arena, not where you're supposed to be, and guards are coming after you. What do you think? What do you think? Do we jump into a skill challenge?
You know how I love skill challenges, but I guess I wouldn't mind being on the other end of one.
Right. Well, I mean, if you don't want, we need an exploration, right? A non-social encounter, non-combat encounter. We don't need it. I mean, it's not required. If I'm designing, I'm going to do it. If you don't enjoy that, then by all means, we can, it's not mandatory. I guess, how did they get from the arena?
What happens between winning the gladiatorial combat and crossing the desert?
Exactly. What's next? Sharkspur would absolutely let the bard talk the king out of his throne eventually, but then now the bard has to be king. Yeah, I mean, heavy is the crown and all that, or heavy is the head that wears the crown. Yeah. I posted a meme today on my Facebook, something about your DM allows crit success on skill checks. And somebody says, that's not rule as written. And the other guy says, fuck off or whatever. But,
yeah. I wouldn't like that either.
Yeah.
Because what if you have a -5? You're not gonna ever convince the king to
right.
The throne.
Right, of anything or ever of anything. All right, so how do we get there then?
So I can imagine maybe, I don't know, it could be like a Triwizard tournament kind of thing where there are different goals, but I don't love that because it's kind of contrived and linear. It could be that the DAO, like, the noble genie gets mad that they beat the champion and says like, well, you'll never escape, da 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 da. I do sort of like the labyrinth idea.
Okay.
Because that's a form of exploration. But how to make a labyrinth fun, I'm not sure, because by design, labyrinths are designed to drive you nuts.
Right. Well, I think Eternal Labyrinth becomes a skill challenge, right? As much as you love them. You have to do it in a cinematic fashion. You're not doing it on a map, because the point at which you're on a map, a labyrinth is just, tedious, in my experience.
I can make it cool. I can make it like there are visual hints of like which way to go. Sort of like in you mentioned you don't really play video games.
Here and there, I'm very hit or miss. Yeah.
So there's a place in Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game, where you have a torch and you're going through this forest and you have to like get to the center of the forest. But if you just like walk toward your goal, you get sort of captured and thrown back to the beginning. And then if you can notice it, the hint is the embers off your torch are blowing slightly in a certain direction. And if you just follow the direction of the embers on your torch, you can get where you need to go. So it could be like environmental bushes or whatever, where like if you can figure out the thing, if you can figure out, oh, I'm supposed to follow those hieroglyphs or whatever.
So maybe because they beat his champion, the Jinn is exiling them, and maybe the oasis. All right. In addition to the shard storm, the oasis is entirely surrounded by a labyrinth. Right. And so to even get out, to get toward into the desert proper, you have to get through the labyrinth.
And perhaps in the labyrinth is where they can do the information gathering. Like there's someone hiding out in the labyrinth that like has been stranded there and knows about the ship. And that's where they find out. It's sort of another video game is Hades, which is a roguelike video game, which I don't like that mechanic, but the idea of a roguelike video game is you get as far as you can, and then you die and you go back to the beginning.
Right.
And the concept of Hades is that Hades' son, the name is escaping me, but is sort of fed up with his dad and wants to get out of Hades and to meet his mother, Persephone. And Hades is like, all right, you'll never escape hell. I've designed the underworld to be inescapable. And so it's like Zachariah or something is his name. And he has to like navigate these this dungeon basically that's always shifting. But in the course of navigating the dungeon, he's meeting NPCs who are sort of dropping hints and helping him along the way.
What if the NPCs that they meet on this one are, like you mentioned earlier, they're all the same guy? And maybe he's a benevolent spirit or whatever. Maybe he's literally Dungeon Master from the cartoons, from the D&D cartoons, the short, bald, gnome-looking guy. That might, you got to know your audience. My home group would love that. Well, most of my players probably not. But he appears in the maze here and there to offer information and also to offer, replenishment of healing potions or something along those lines.
Yeah, I was in a campaign where toward the end it became apparent that all our resources were drained and we weren't going to beat the last encounter. There's no way. Like people didn't have spell slots, and the final encounter was Demogorgon and like a bunch of demons. So it turned out like one of the gnome NPC, I'm sure this was homebrew, but one of the gnome NPCs was a god, Glitter Gold, who like flipped each of us a coin and gave us the equivalent of a long rest, like a sort of magic item long rest. So there could be something like that where I could cheat. And if I know that they're going into the final encounter under-resourced, but I think they'll be fine. They have these potions of speed.
Right. Well, okay. And so, all right. So we've got the NPC encounters, which can be information about the Spelljammer ship, the astral ship. We've got resource, if they need resources, that the encounter can give them resources.
I love riddles. There could be a riddle that if, they don't need to solve it, but if they solve it, this wall drops.
Exactly.
And there's
So,
a shortcut.
yep. So there's a bypass riddle. You can absolutely do traps, crushing wall traps, spike traps, Indiana Jones rolling boulder traps, glyphs like electrified lightning glyphs traps, sleep gas. So you can just sort of pick a bunch of those things, and maybe you create yourself a little table, and because you don't necessarily do all of them, but you pull stats for them, for each of these things, have them handy, and so then players really do have agency depending on what direction they go. Maybe they hit these various traps, and you have them make some survival checks to as far as directionality and getting lost. And I don't think I don't think you use a full blown map of the labyrinth necessarily. I guess you could. I haven't really tried it in modern D&D.
I'm gonna do it.
Are you?
Because I can. And I'm
yeah,
gonna have a computer generated labyrinth.
There you go, and place your different elements in various spots, and so they literally encounter. And so then you can throw in some other, creature encounters. Obviously, you're in a labyrinth, so the obvious, although it is a minotaur, although we're getting quite a bit away from, sort of the desert theme there, but that's okay too.
I was looking at a this is, I guess, like a setting book that I got on DM's Guild.
Mhm.
And some of the enemies are like pillar of sand is the enemy. And
There you
so
go.
it could be a sort of homebrewed what is the like gelatinous ooze? Like,
Yeah.
the ones that like go through the hallways.
Gelatinous
But this
cube,
one-
yeah.
Yeah. But this one is sand instead of jello.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Sharks for talking wall in the labyrinth. Labyrinth, absolutely. Yeah. So we just talked about 20 or so, or a dozen or so non-combat encounters for the labyrinth, and you could throw combat encounters, whether it's whether they're sand related or not. I think you'd probably want to keep with the theme, right? Or at least sort of earth and or air related, I think, because the elemental plane of dust is set between earth and air, if I recall.
It's I think it's like the negative planes are like a plane, but with all the life drained out of it. So like the negative air would be the vacuum. The negative fire is ash, like everything's burned. The negative water is salt because everything's dried up. And so sand is earth because everything's broken down.
I follow. Yeah. So what are some easy, not necessarily easy, but recognizable creatures that we might randomly find?
When I think, so labyrinth and desert are not necessarily incompatible, because I think of like an Egyptian pyramid.
Right, exactly. Oh, yeah, there's obviously
like,
a mummy.
Yeah. So
there's a mummy lord in there somewhere.
Yeah, so I mean, pyramids are very much associated with the desert, but also associated with traps and.
Yep, your mummy lord's a nice CR-15. That'll be a nice little encounter, maybe with a couple of his own allies or minions. Yep. And let's see, what else? What other kinds of creatures? Let's see. Yeah, Sharks. Yeah. Sharks was asking how many hours run the game. So it's basically, it's informal. They're going to play it. Theoretically, it's a one shot of 3 hours, but it's also like, could certainly be a multi-session or sort of mini campaign.
This is like, this is a stopgap between our old campaign and the new campaign. And so the DM's not going to complain for having extra time to prep.
And if it came to the point, during the session where it seems like, yeah, or if something changes where it definitely has to be only a single session or just two, there's always like, I think the labyrinth is going to be the big potential time sink. They could spend a couple of sessions in there. And you can do all sorts of interesting things inside the labyrinth, but it's all optional, right? Other than the information about the spelljamming ship. Like if you need to ditch some of it, you're ditching that stuff. And I think also the labyrinth encounters probably, take less in terms of prep. You're going to set up probably between 2 and 4 creature encounters, probably using some of the creatures we've mentioned, and then you're going to have probably half a dozen non-creature encounters, whether they're social or skill based or traps, whatever.
You mentioned near the beginning, you said something like 4 beats. Can you refresh my memory? What are the 4 beats you try to hit in a one shot?
Yeah, so 2 combats, a social, and a skill, basically. And my tendency is to do combat, social, skill challenge or exploration, and combat to sort of do that.
That's what we're doing. Arena, labyrinth is social and skill.
Yep. Nope, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I again, why I gravitate that way, I don't know. There's so much about this game that is so individualized. And that's the thing that I keep going back to. Our community is so amazing. The fact that the 34th time I ran the Shardstorm adventure, I had players coming up with ideas that nobody else had. It's just so cool, right? I mean, that's just such a neat phenomenon to me that after, let's say an average of 5 players, my 162nd player came up with something new, right? That's just wild. That's just wild. And so, the more you do one shots, the more you get to your own preference. That may not be the right pattern for Tony or anybody else, or for Sharkspur or whoever, but it's one that's worked for me. Ooh, Sand Snake eats the ship with characters on it at the end, and they have to fight their way out from inside using the weapon system on the ship. Yeah, if like the DM's not ready for the next campaign yet, there's your session number 5. Fight your way out from the inside using the weapon system on the ship. I'm excited for Spelljammer to come out, and I'm also excited because my first Spelljammer campaign starts hopefully this week. I've got 3 players signed up. This is my noon Thursday game. So if anybody's listening and interested in playing Spelljammer, hit me up on Start Playing. Get into that noon Thursday game if it works for your schedule, because Spelljammer is just such a blast. So there's my plug for the day. I'll do another one at the end, I'm sure. But all right. So how are you feeling about this adventure, Tony? Do you feel like we've made some progress?
Yeah, definitely. The part I really wanted to flesh out that I think we have is that sort of center where they start. What happens, and I'm sort of also interested in the genie that runs the place might have a relationship, even a brother or something in the material plane, like a relationship for handing over slaves, or they had to have really pissed somebody off to be
right.
to be exiled to an elemental plane for theft.
Right.
And so I'm imagining like a powerful archmage or even genie that, is like, you know what? Screw you guys.
Right. A genie. I think it's a genie. I don't think it's an archmage. I think it's a genie as well in the prime. I just do. I don't know.
Yeah, like the proverbial merchant, but you pissed off the wrong merchant.
That's right.
They're not all pushovers.
Yep. To quote Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, you fucked with the wrong Marine. That's a movie that hasn't aged terribly well, by the way. No, it's completely out of apropos of nothing there, but yeah. All right. Okay.
And so to sum up the adventure, they like are either trading in some illicit substance or try to take this merchant for a ride. They get caught, and then whoever wants to punish them has this relationship with this noble genie in the plane of sand, sends them there. The bard maybe wasn't part of the group, but like, weaseled her way into, like got plane shifted there and brought all the items and negotiated this like release of, if they can defeat this combat. The genie never thought in a million years they would win this combat, but they do. And if they don't, I could just pop them back into the prison and boom, the secret passage opens into the labyrinth.
Right. Sure.
And then if once they make it through the labyrinth, which will have its own set of challenges, they have to face the storm, the spirit of the dunes, and make their way to the ship and head on out. I think that's a pretty good adventure, pretty good mini adventure.
Yeah. No, I think, and we're hitting on, all three of the pillars, at least a little bit. And, you've got some a challenging final combat for sure. No, absolutely. In the labyrinth, you've got, it's easy enough to pull in, like you say, a good riddle, right? A good riddle. Some people hate riddles. Some DMs don't do them very well. I'm sort of mediocre at riddles. I like to do them. But my riddles, for whatever reason, and this is anecdotal, so it, statistically it may not be true, but it feels like my riddles are either 3-second solutions or desperate players saying, I've got a high wisdom. Can I please make a wisdom check?
My character would know the answer to this riddle.
Exactly, which is not wrong. I mean, that's why you have numbers on a sheet for wisdom and whatnot. You're not relying solely on your intelligence and wisdom as a player. But at the same time, riddles are supposed to be part of the fun of the game, right? Of the immersive part of the game.
And like maybe with the wisdom check, you don't give them the answer, but you give them like,
Hints,
you notice on the walls, images of da 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 da.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, for some reason, nothing in between. Nice 1 to 2 minute solution riddles. Almost never. I don't know. Maybe I'm bad at picking them. Then I have just brilliant players, or really not brilliant players, one or the other.
I would normally ask some of my creative friends for input, but they're all players in this one.
Right. Well, Sharkspur and Edwin have been very helpful today, and hopefully I've given you some stuff. Sounds like you've got some good stuff to work with. So, all right. So probably we'll end a little bit early today, but so I just want to take a few minutes and first of all, thank you so much, Tony, for joining today and for providing the topic.
Well, thanks for helping me out. All our viewers included.
Now we expect a full report after at the conclusion of this adventure that you're running. I want to know how it happened. Is Darius playing?
he's the iffy one.
He's the iffy one. Oh man,
Because
tell it.
his wife should be giving birth at the time of the session. So
Well, giving birth can take a long time. So
that's
if
true. I'm
he
like, do
can,
you have a laptop? I mean, come on. I'm sure the hospital has Wi-Fi.
damn it, Darius. All right. So, but yeah, you have to let us know. You have to let us know how it went. I expect a full report. All right, and then just a shout out to the guys from Alchemy RPG. Thank you so much for the beers and the cigarettes. I am a travel smoker. I don't normally, but when I'm on the road for whatever reason, thank you for the beer and for the company.
And to Abyssal Brews and Tom Kartos on Patreon for providing inspiration for the
Oh yes, absolutely,
adventure.
for the adventure. Yes. Thank you to all of you. And then just a quick note, I do have a number of new campaigns starting on startplaying.games, as well as some spots in some existing games. Make sure you hit me up there. If you're not playing a game with me, sign up, mention that you saw me on the stream, and I'll get you your first session at no charge. Even if it's not a session zero. I've recently moved to not charging for my session zeros. But even if you're jumping in midstream, just let me know that you watch the Twitch, and I'll give you a free week. Save you $25 or $30 depending on the session. Everybody come back Thursday night and you watch as Tony and his crew attempt to navigate their way through Rise of the Drow. At this point, we're pretty much outside of the adventure module completely. Doing Underdark stuff, which is okay. I build the campaign as Rise of the Drow, but also other Underdark stuff. So make sure you guys come out. That is 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursday nights. We are informally and unofficially known as the second best D&D stream on Thursday nights. So we are, at least according to my son. So that's where that comes from. Everybody have a wonderful week. Thank you to those that join in the chat. Thank you especially to Tony, and who the hell knows what we'll talk about next week, but we'll come up with something.
And whatever's bothering me on Monday, we'll talk about Tuesday.
Well, I don't know. I might come up with something between now and then. It's